Noise! We're looking at the noise bit of Serum today, and it's super good. It does a lot more than make noise, but you can, of course, make noise with it. It is the noise bit of Serum, and I'm excited by it because it's awesome. And I'm going to explain to you what the little buttons do, like what this little button is and what this little button is, what this twiddly-do does. I'm going to explain all of these things to you right now. So we've got Serum. We have the initial preset. We can remember this by going, not remember, we can do this again by doing menu, initial preset, aka init preset. Sweet, now we have the initial preset. Brilliant. So what is this noise thing? Well, it's basically like another oscillator, except it plays back a sample. So we can focus in on the noise bit in particular by turning off oscillator A, ding, and turning on the noise bit, dong, and pressing a sound. Sometimes it glitches up, so you have to re-choose something. Let's just choose the top one. Sweet. So we have all these different noises here. So as you can see, we have analog noise, like we have the level, obvious stuff like that. Naturally, you've got some arrows because not all noise is the same. And then we can choose different noises. But here's where it gets super cool. We can choose more than just noise. We can do attacks for kicks. We got like attacks for snares. We have like glass tings. That didn't make sense, but that'll make more sense in a second. And then we have other weird things like air can, and then sound effect type things. All sorts of fun stuff like that. Right, let's get into some buttons that are non-trivial. In other words, things that you might find actually useful. So obviously you have all these different sounds in here, which are pretty cool. But you may have noticed for things like the kicks. So for example, if we choose an attack on a kick, something like this, you'll be like, duh, that doesn't sound like an attack on a kick. That's because we need to know what this button right here does. This little button here that looks like an arrow pointing at an eye or an arrow pointing to a stop is the one-shot button. So basically, we've got to remember is this noise bit isn't generating the noise. It's playing back I think it's a stereo sample. Might be mono, I think it's stereo. Not really that relevant. It's playing back a sample. So if you imagine the kick of an attack, it's quite short. It's just like an attack on a kick. Got a text message. We'll put that on silent. It's like the attack of the kick, and then the sample's done really quick. So by default, it loops through, which isn't good because you just get a looped sound. So if we turn on this button, it will just play it through once. And we have the attack for our kicks, which is dope because we can either make a kick drum or we can add a transient or an attack to a normal synth sound. Super good. And then when you bear in mind, you have all sorts of more interesting attacks, stuff like these glass lids. That one's cool. Turn up the level maybe. Have a rave to that. Look at that one. That one's cool too. And you can suddenly add interesting attacks to your synth sounds without having to program in some advanced crazy modulation to get something cool happening at the front bit of the sound. Really cool, right? So you can, if you have just your normal sound happening and you're like, I need to make the attack better because I want the start of the sound to be more, the start of the soundy, more attacky, more plucky, more whatever. We can just add in a noise sample, kick it into one-shot mode and choose a cool transient. It's definitely worth having a good dig through all these different sounds because there's loads of interesting ones like we have like strums. Naturally, through effects and in context, it sounds cooler. And we even have things like metal ticks, like that one too. That one's cool. We even have some snare action. Oh, check out the snare. And so on. So you can make interesting sounds, not just drums, but you can make your normal synth sounds more attacky, which is sweet. So, something you may have noticed at the moment, when let's just choose something like a tom. This is basically a keyboard. No matter which note I press, it plays back the sample at exactly the same speed. And we have two ways to change the speed in which the sample plays back. I thought I made you quiet. How do I... Silent, there you go. Two ways of changing the speed. So way number one is you can just change the pitch. So at the moment, you can play it back faster or slower. So you can take something like a tom here and make it nice and high pitch and just make a really cool attack out of it just by pitching it up. Pretty cool, right? But we can do something different and cooler, which is the key tracking, which is this keyboard thing here. It's basically what it does is it plays it back faster or slower depending on what note you press on the keyboard, almost like a sampler would do. So if we trigger this, oh, maybe like this. So basically it plays it back faster if you do a higher note on the keyboard. Why is this useful? Well, what it allows you to do is basically make it sound different depending on where you are on the keyboard, which can make each note a little bit better. And it's a sort of thing, there's not a lot of uses for it, but it just fits in. Sometimes it's what you want to do. Or maybe if you want to make something like, I don't know, some sort of, isn't that cool? You can do that, etc. It's up to you to figure out a good use for it, but that's what that button does. It determines basically what you want the thing to do, but normally you probably want it turned off. Kapow! Look at that. Right, we have 3 more buttons to play around with. Then I'll give you some fun tips. Fun tips. That was a delay. Right, so what we have is, let's go back to, let's choose something else. Something like maybe wind chimes. Oh, isn't that just beautiful? So we have the pan here. This one's obvious, see? Left, right, left, right, left, right, etc. You can modulate this, remember. Any knob you can modulate. That's what she said. Right, so we also have 2 here that aren't as obvious what they do. So I'm going to tell you what they do right now. So what phase does, it's not actually, they call it phase because it's analogous to the wave table things in the actual wavetable bit. But what is the better way to look at the phase and the noise oscillator is it's the point in which you're going to start the sample. So with this noise thing, it's playing back a sample. Because we have one shot turned on, it's playing back the sample once. So this phase determines where in the sample we start from. So on the far left, it starts at the beginning. But as we move through, it starts at different positions, like. Maybe not the best example, but you can see how we do it right near the end. Horrible example as well. I chose a horrible example, but that basically just determines where in the sample you start. That's one way of looking at it. And you can even do cool things like scratchy effects by modulating it. Oh, bad example. Let's choose something different like scratchy, scratchy. Let's turn off one shot so it's looping. Oh, look, I'm some sort of scratch DJ. So much fun to be had. If you choose a different one, maybe it sounds better. No, that's a horrible example, but you get the idea. You can basically change the start position or the phase, depending on how you want to look at it. And then this rand basically chooses a random position to start from or a random phase every time you trigger a note. That's basically the idea behind rand. So cool stuff, right? So how would we use this in some sort of situation where we're doing something of something? Right. What we would normally do is maybe let's turn off noise temporarily. We'll just have an oscillator. We'll choose something pretty hollow. Just make a normal lead, simple sound, something like, I don't know, freak. Worst chord progression ever. But maybe we have a sound and we just want to add basically thicken up the high frequencies a little bit. It might be quite nice just to add in some noise, because remember what noise is. If you look at it through a spectrum analyzer, it's worth doing it. It's basically semi-random collection of frequencies across the entire frequency spectrum, all at approximately the same amplitude. So it's a great way of filling in frequencies, especially high frequencies. It sounds really nice. So if you just want to thicken up so the higher frequencies of a certain sound, you can turn on the noise. Definitely ease off on it. That's a horrible example. Let me find you a better example and do some sort of cut. Right, that was a cool cut, right? I found a great sound, a sound that I'm making for a sample pack, and this is the sound. Oh, look at that, lovely. So let me show you how I've used this noise oscillator. So this is what it sounded like before. and with the noise. So it adds a little bit of subtle high frequency shimmer, like a little bit of noise to the high frequency. So this is what the noise bit is. Oh, lovely little air can action. Can you hear it? Pretty cool, right? Just adds that little bit of something else, definitely real subtle. Also, let me show you something else cool that I did. Found it! Right, so here's another example of how you can take that noise oscillator and do something a little bit different. So in this particular example, we have this sound I made. Nice sort of bubbly sound, and all of this comes from the noise oscillator. None of this is coming from the actual waveform. Granted, it's going through a filter thing and some effects, but all of the original sound is coming from this noise oscillator. In this case, it's coming from this electricity sample. And then we've done some cool modulations. But it just shows that you can actually take this noise oscillator and do a lot more than just add in some noise. And yes, this video has been quite long, but I have one more bit of information for you. And it's not really information, it's more just an idea or something you can do, but I'm not going to show you. Basically, what you can do is with this noise oscillator thing, you can actually import your own samples into it. So yes, there's a lot of cool samples in here, but you can actually import your own. Now, the reason why I'm not going to show you is, unfortunately, whenever you import your own noise sample, when you then save the preset, your sample isn't stored in the preset because the preset would be huge otherwise. So if, for example, you made a cool sound by importing your own noise, you then had it in your track, that's all well and good, but then you move computers or you send the preset to somebody else, you're gonna have to then send that other person or move your noise sample onto your new computer. It's a bit of a headache file management wise, but it's worth looking into. So if it seems like a good idea to you and your brain, read the manual for details on the file management when it comes to noises, but you can import your own. So if that sounds cool to you, great, run with it. Do something useful and interesting, and hope you learned something. I've been Multiplier, goodbye.